All right, let's talk about emotional maturity. We often think of it as this far off, perfect state we're supposed to achieve someday. But what if that's not the point at all? What if it's really just a practical set of tools we can start using right now to make our lives a little better? That's exactly what we're going to break down today. What this journey of self-assessment actually looks like. So, I want to start with this big question right here. What if maturity isn't about being perfect? What if it's actually the complete opposite? This is the core idea we're going to explore, that real growth only starts when we finally give ourselves permission to stop chasing some impossible ideal of perfection. So where do we begin? Well, the first step is all about changing our perspective. It starts when we decide to put on a new pair of glasses, a new lens, to see the people around us in a totally different light. And this is a huge shift in how we see the world. The old, immature view is super quick to judge, right? Someone cuts you off in traffic, they're a monster. A coworker misses a deadline, they're an idiot. But the mature view, it takes a breath and understands that underneath most bad behavior isn't evil. It's usually just fear or anxiety. Suddenly, the world isn't so black and white anymore. And honestly, it gets a whole lot more interesting. This really shows the kind of work we have to do. It means finally getting that people can't read our minds. We have to actually use our words calmly to explain what we need. It's about seeing the whole person, recognizing that your friend who's a bit disorganized might also be the most creative person you know. And maybe the biggest one, it's about offering compassion, especially to our parents, and understanding that they were probably just struggling, fighting their own battles that we knew nothing about. Okay, so once we start looking at other people with a bit more grace, the next step, and this is the tough one, is to turn that exact same lens right back on ourselves for a really honest self-assessment. And let's just start with this beautifully blunt truth. You are surprisingly difficult to live with. Now, that's not an insult, I promise. It's actually an invitation. It's about dropping all the sentimental stories we tell ourselves and getting real about our own quirks, our own blind spots, and the ways we make life tricky for the people who love us. And this leads to a complete reframing of what confidence even is. See, it's not about thinking you're amazing or that you have all the answers. Real confidence comes from the quiet, powerful realization that everybody, and I mean everybody, is just as confused, scared, and lost as you are. We're all just winging it, and there's so much freedom in that. So how do we actually do this? Well, for starters, it's about learning how to genuinely apologize. Just taking that brave first step to say, you know what, I was wrong. It also means learning to hear criticism without immediately throwing up your defenses. And maybe most importantly, it's about learning to be a friend to yourself, to forgive your own screw-ups and past mistakes, because beating yourself up about them gets you absolutely nowhere. So you're doing all this internal work. How does that actually show up in the real world? It all comes down to mastering the good enough day and understanding the power of the practical. I love this because it's so simple, but it's also incredibly profound. We completely underestimate how much the small, physical stuff affects our mood. So before you have any big, serious talk with someone, just stop and ask a few questions. Is anyone tired? Is anyone hungry? Is there some other stress humming in the background? Seriously, never try to solve a major relationship issue on an empty stomach. Your blood sugar has way more say in the matter than you think. And all of this brings us to the core concept, which psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott puts so perfectly. It's about having an appreciation for what is good enough. Emotional maturity is learning to let go of that toxic, damaging obsession with perfection, the perfect job, the perfect partner, the perfect life. It's about learning to find the value in things that are a little messy and flawed, but are still, good enough. And when you start to get this, your whole outlook changes. You stop banking all your hopes on some huge 5-year plan for happiness. Instead, you realize that real satisfaction, it usually shows up in these tiny little moments. You start celebrating a day that just went okay without any major disasters. You notice the coffee tastes good. It's a shift from chasing big goals to just appreciating the small, quiet wins. So, as we start to pull all this together, it's so important to remember, this isn't some checklist you finish and then you're done. Emotional maturity is an ongoing journey. It's a practice, not a destination you arrive at. And what a freeing thought this is. Being a grown-up isn't about destroying the childlike parts of who you are. No, real maturity is about making peace with them. It's about accepting that, yeah, we all have moments where we act like we're 2 years old. And when that part of you shows up, you don't yell at it. You greet it with some kindness and try to figure out what it needs. So, what are the big takeaways here? It's pretty simple, really. First, maturity isn't a personality transplant, it's just a shift in your perspective. Second, it's a journey that has to be fueled by self compassion, not constant self criticism. And finally, the goal isn't perfection, it's just learning to appreciate the good enough in yourself, in other people, and in every single day. And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. I want you to take a second and really ask yourself, what's one good enough moment that you can appreciate today? It might be something really small, and that's exactly the point.